You're listening to Cowley's Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops. Welcome you wonderful people, and thank you for listening to Cowley's Instructor Podcast. So today we have Chris Bentsted on the episode. Chris is amazing. I love the way his mind works. I love the way he can describe things different to other trainers that I've heard. And also he's excellent for if you have any questions in the industry. Chris is your man, basically. So even if he doesn't 100% know the answer, he'll know someone who does know the answer. So he's your man to go to. So any questions you have within the industry, get in touch with Chris. On today's episode then, so we talk about Chris's many hats that he wears. We talk a little bit about SEN, so special educational needs, and the competency we're talking about is about adapting the lesson, and we move on and discuss about the national standards. So an excellent episode lined up for you. Hope you enjoy. So welcome, Chris Bentsted. I described you the other day as the man with many hats. So I think my first question for you is, could you explain some of those hats, and then which one are we wearing today?
I often forget how many. It's a bit like having multiple personalities as well, because they all have slightly different needs from depending on who I'm talking to. I mainly say I get bored easily, so I like looking for the new stuff, and I like challenging things. So they all come from the same place. I have one title, which is I like to solve problems. So every single one of the things I do is about solving problems. So to start with, I'm a driving instructor. However, I don't have a car, a tuition vehicle. So I specialize in theory. So that's my theory hat. I'm an audit trainer. So I train driving instructors. And I work with instructors and training instructors, but a lot of that I do as people are training elsewhere and they get in touch because they've got a sticking point, and I like what I call brief strategic approaches. So my business partner says I come in, throw a hand grenade, and then leave people to it. But I like to think it's slightly more constructive than destructive. And I kind of come in, look at where's the problem, help them understand what the problem is, and then give them the skills to go and fix it. Then we've got the DITC, which was the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective, the signposting platform for the industry, and came from the fact that people didn't know what was out there, including me. And I like to think I know most people and most things that are out in and about, things that we've got access to. And even then I come across things I've never heard of and they've been about for years. Or I speak to an instructor who it's perfectly normal for them. They know it's there. So, and that can include associations. There's people that don't know associations exist. So we started up the DITC for that benefit. So I'm like the tourist information centre for driving instructors. If you don't know, ask me. I might not know, but I will know someone that does. And then I'm a gob on a stick. It's the only official title I've got for it, really. So I talk. I do things like podcasts. I get a phone call from Sky News saying, we've got a thing on tomorrow, and that's if I'm lucky with that much notice. Are you free? And then go and talk to someone and try and inject a bit of professional insight into things like that. And then outside of the industry, so outside and inside, I do business coaching. So I support people with their businesses, and I specialize in driving instructors because I know that industry so well. But I also work with an accountant, a travel agent, and an electrician, looking at different businesses. And then the biggest one for me, although probably the smallest in impact, is my kids book, which is available on Amazon. Is There a Monster? Which I wrote with my then 3-year-old. He's nearly 7 in 32 days' time, he told me this morning. And that's a problem-solving book for kids that can't sleep. It gives them the control. It gives them the skills to go to sleep. So it gives them a rhyme that they say to get rid of the monsters, and they're not real monsters. They're worries. They're those sorts of things. And I'm never going to make money out of it. It's cost a fortune to have it out there and everything else, but it was a really interesting journey. And then as a side kind of note, I am qualified in clinical hypnotherapy, and in the industry became known as the NLP person, neuro-linguistic programming for short. And I spent a number of years working with instructors on NLP skills, which I might revisit. I don't know.
That is a lot of hats.
I've got a big hat cupboard.
Yeah, fair enough. There's way too many there for me to talk about. I'm intrigued by the book, and I keep meaning to buy the book, and I keep forgetting. So maybe after today's podcast, I will go and get the book, because I think my kids are at that age where they'll enjoy it. I think today, because you've got so many hats, I'd like your trainer hat. Partly because actually, and this maybe is me being a bit selfish, because I've heard you on Terry's podcast, like for hours and hours of conversations, and actually interesting. I think you two don't tend to go down that route with your conversations. It's more your industry knowledge hat and a bit of the theory stuff, and some of the coaching stuff, but you don't tend to have that. Like he tends to sort of use other people. Maybe he thinks you're a rubbish trainer. So I think I want to dig into that a little bit more, because I think when I have heard you talk about things from being a trainer, it's always sort of quite interesting, because you have this sort of weird mind that sees things differently, and can explain things differently, and I always find it quite an interesting perspective. So I think we'll use that part of your brain today, if that's okay.
That's fine. I have one question.
Yeah.
Is interesting good or bad?
Oh, massively good. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, because interesting is one of those words, isn't it? It's well, that's interesting. So said about the man who's walking down the road naked.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, I do tend to use interesting as a good thing. I if I find something interesting, it's a good thing.
Good.
Before we do that though, I don't think I know your how I got into the industry story, which is strange. I remember we went for a meal before the VR thing, and you asked both me and then I not rudely didn't ask, I deliberately didn't ask back, because I was waiting for this podcast episode. So do you want to tell us how you got into the industry?
Well, that explains why I've been offended for the last few weeks, waiting for you to find out. So my background was retail. When I was at school, I was a bit of a geek. I now know that I was dyslexic and no one had picked up on it, because actually I was really good at coping strategies, which is something that I've carried with me, and that's why I've ended up where I am. And you know, I wasn't very good with people. I didn't like people. I didn't feel the need to be around people. So I think I fitted that kind of geek title quite nicely. And I then got a job in retail, and I think retail should be like national service, because I learned how to talk. A lot of people regret me going into retail. I learned how to talk and how to learn about specific products or subjects, because I went into a shop with a woman who'd been on holiday for a few weeks, didn't know it was my second week, and expected me to know everything. And she was a right cow. We ended up really good friends. And I decided you either give up, or you kind of take the bull by the horns, and that's what I did. So I specialized in it was a stationery and toy shop, and I was in the stationery department. I specialized in inkjets, and I specialized in the pens, the top end stuff, Parker, Waterman. I hate Mont Blanc, but those sorts of things. And because of that, the company then liked me because I knew what I was talking about, and the staff in the shop, who a lot of which had been doing it for 20 odd years, started coming to me and asking me questions because I'd learnt specifics. I'd specialized. I'd got a niche, even though at that point I was a Saturday boy and I was in there one day a week. I then moved on to doing part-time, and I was going to get a proper job, and do a year's work, and then maybe look at going to university to do something to do with computers. But they ended up being training roles that I was going for, which was interesting. And I didn't know about that at the time, but that was kind of the thing I was going towards. Missed out on the job that would have changed my life, which was working with Nikki Clark and Vidal Sassoon's salons, going around and training those members of staff on how to use their till systems and things like that. And I think that could have been a totally different path for me to go down. And then I became, well, I couldn't find a job because I didn't have the experience, and I didn't have the experience because I couldn't get a job. And the company that I was working for, which, to give them a name check, they're now known as Lorimer's. They were JH Lorimer, and they're a stationery and toy shop they had 11 branches. And they gave me a job as the youngest buyer for a privately owned multiple in the UK, as far as we're aware, at the age of 18. I was buying for 11 stores, specializing in art and the pens. I love my pens. And yeah, I got to learn that I didn't like sitting behind a desk all day. And I did a number of years doing that. I hated being behind a desk. And then I got the opportunity to go and manage one of the shops, which was the bit I'd missed. And I learned that I didn't like doing that either. But I loved being in the shop. And although I don't like people, I enjoyed selling. I enjoyed knowing about products. And I then learned it wasn't the people I didn't like, it was the burnout afterwards, because it takes a lot out from me. I'm an introvert, and therefore I end up at the end of the evening, I'm broke. I'm worn out. Whereas that kind of extrovert, where people gain from that experience, I don't understand. That's not me. So went from there to become a sales rep for a year because the company got taken over, and then credit crunch hit and I was made redundant. And really, the answer to your question is I got made redundant. But that journey was the journey at which I then looked at what I was doing. As a sales rep, they sent me on training, and I discovered learning again because I didn't necessarily enjoy school. I was all right at it, but I didn't enjoy it. But I discovered proper learning by going on a sales course. And they then said, we're not sending you on another course. And I needed more learning. So I literally stuck a pin in a book and found clinical hypnotherapy. And I was like, well, I'll do that then. And I got halfway through that and then got made redundant and decided to become a driving instructor because my skill sets were, I'm good at training, and although I'm not keen on them, I'm good with people. My trainer looked at me slightly confused and he said, well, everyone says I like driving or I'm good at driving. And I went, good luck, because I'm not. And I still don't like cars. It was, as long as they got 5 wheels, I'm happy. And yeah, I kind of went into it because of the training, and I think there's a big divide, and that's not saying there's right and wrong, but there's a big divide in the industry between people that teach people and people that teach driving. And I think that you've got those two sides of things, and it's a bit like my mum was 20 odd years with 5-year-olds, teaching in schools, and she always said they came in, they were either really good at the social or really good at the academic, and you never got both. And her job was to bolster the one that they weren't so good at, and to build on that side of things, in the way that I hate education, because you have to be good at what you're not good at. Why? Just be really good at the stuff you are good at. I think that's a much better way to do it. But it's not what CPD is about, is it? But we can always learn more but actually focus on your skills and strengths. And that's what I saw the skills and strengths of the job are, because you don't drive.
No,
You know,
not very often.
it's you're sat there and you're talking about stuff, but you're not really talking about driving. You're talking about the person. That's how I see it, but I would do, because I'm the person type of person, not the driving type of person. So so I then decided to finish off my hypnosis training, because I thought that's a brilliant thing to partner with driving. Forgetting it would just be like a massive legal situation of putting people in a trance while they're driving down the road. And then I discovered NLP and kind of ran in that direction, which is awesome, and everyone should investigate, because it's such a brilliant model to run alongside being a driving instructor.
Yep, maybe someone should do a course about it.
Yes, I do. It's one on the shelf. It's one on the shelf. We're looking at it, actually. So watch this space. You never know.
I'm intrigued that when you said about the not liking people, but liking the sort of kind of on the floor selling to people, and I wonder actually if there's an element of the problem solving in that. Is that you were solving a problem for someone, even though you are selling to them, but you're trying to sell them the correct product. So I wondered if there was an element of that in there.
Yes, and that's when I say selling, it's never hard to sell. It's what are your needs? What is the benefit of the different things? I've never bought £100 pair of trainers. I don't need them. If I was a runner, and anyone who's seen me clearly knows I'm not, then I'd see the value in it, but I don't need that. So I would as happily sell a 20p Bic biro as I would a £200 Parker pen. It depends on what the person wants, and that, for me, that's the same in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's individual. I do like this idea as well of, I suppose, instructors being either driver or people related, and I suppose again it's probably on a spectrum. And you said a little bit about like specialize and be good at what you like, be better at what you're good at. But I think because we're in the car one-to-one and you can't pass off the other stuff to other people, there probably is an element of, instructors need to be good at both, don't they, really? And so that's where you see PD comes in. If
we look at the big picture, driving instructor running a school, even if you're just on your own, you're running a business, sorry. So even if you're with a franchise, you're still self-employed. So actually, if we then break that down into the bigger picture, get an accountant, get a VA to do your paperwork and deal with your emails, look at outsourcing stuff, because do the stuff you're good at. And actually, you can then make more money that way. I agree. In the car, in that role, you're kind of stuck. That said, you can always outsource theory training. Drop that one in there quick. But yeah, if you look at the bigger job role, specialize. Be good at being good.
Yeah, there is also an element, and you're absolutely right. You could outsource the theory training to some excellent theory test explain people. But you can actually probably do that with other stuff. Like there's people out there that would quite happily do Zooms on your pupils' psychology of driving and helping them through that, so that they can come to the lesson saying, this is what I want to put into practice. If that's not your wheel bag, you could outsource that. And I suppose as well, actually, and I wonder if instructors maybe could do this a little bit more, and maybe they do. I don't 100% know. I know in my area it happens occasionally, where you have a pupil who maybe has particular needs or is particularly anxious or struggles, and send them on to an instructor that does specialize in that side of it. Who might be a better sort of kind of place to deal with that. And it's not for everyone. I wonder if instructors sometimes feel that they're failing that pupil by not passing them on, but actually they're probably doing the opposite. They're doing them a service. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember when I was first starting out, I think I was probably still with BSM, because I trained with BSM, and I I felt like I was failing because that pupil was really struggling with manual with no diagnosed reason for it. So, why wouldn't they be able to? And I had a chat with a guy who I've recently bumped into. His grandkids are at my kid's school. It was really weird because I walked up to him and went, "Is your name Zippy?" And he gave me a very strange look because that's what we always called him as a driving instructor. And he said, "Move them to someone that doesn't talk as much," which I took as an insult for a little bit. But I realized actually their specific need was that they were Russian. And I talk too much for someone whose language, first language isn't English. I adapt much more now, but then, I was very green. And yeah, that was one of my learning moments, was going, you can't be all things to all people. And I'm guilty of trying to be on occasion. But what I've learnt is it's just as good to be able to say, I know people that can help.
Yeah, absolutely. And even from a business perspective, actually, you will find that that person may go away and then absolutely love this new instructor, but they'll give you some kudos for saying, like, you quite often get that message back saying, "Oh, really, thank you for sort of kind of setting me up," and they may even recommend you to their pupils that don't have this special need, or they may recommend, it doesn't matter, it's like, and that instructor might because that instructor who maybe specializes in whatever they specialize in might not want some of the inquiries they get because they're like, no, that's not my speciality, so they might pass it back. So it's all kind of like works well from a business perspective as well. I can imagine that you're a nightmare to teach.
Yes.
But I think you'd also be one of my favorite pupils, because in that same sentence, because I love a pupil who thinks differently, because you learn from them, and they're my favorite sort of pupils that challenge me and ask me to explain it, or want to explain it themselves in their own little way, and how it works. And a pupil that's engaging like that is, I'm just like, I'll have that pupil, please. Send them over.
There's a real problem, isn't there? Human problem with the fact we don't like being made to feel stupid, and you have to go into it with that the willingness to learn, and have that really open thing of going, no one's trying to make me feel stupid. If I feel stupid, it's because I feel stupid. But actually, what I can do is not feel like I'm perfect or complete, and be open to all of that amazing stuff, and assume, again, a really early learning of mine was sat in the test center. We all think we're gods of our own cars. There's a real danger there, that because as you said, we're the only one there, and we end up having to do all of these things. So we decide what the best technique is, what our preferred technique is, and that's the one everyone should use in a way. And sitting at the test center, and I was chatting away with an ADI, and made some big bold statement, which I know is not like me at all. And I discovered that there were just two ADIs, really new to the job. One was a doctor previously, and the other one was a lawyer. Now, in that room, I was the least educated person, absolutely, by a country mile. And it taught me never to assume the background of somebody. And that's one of the things I love about the industry, is there's so much expertise from other areas that people draw in, and we should embrace that more. I don't know how, but we should really have these specialisms outside of what we do, to help with, if you've got a pupil. I love teaching physicists. I was never good at physics. I had a rubbish physics teacher. I had to get a tutor for physics. I went from a U to a C with a tutor in my A level, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't get it. And then after leaving school, I kind of discovered the Infinite Monkey Cage, and that was a brilliant podcast with Brian Cox. And I just started loving physics, and I just absorbed as much as I could, and then realized we teach physics for a living. That's the job. Is stationary cars don't crash. That's physics. So it it's really interesting. And then I've taught a number of graduates. I've taught 2 nuclear physicists, 2 physics teachers, and most of them have turned around and said that I have physics understanding. It's my own version of physics. That's the problem, but that they can see where it's coming from. Oh, that's fine. That's my approach to life, as long as it kind of makes sense. And those specialisms, if you're teaching someone who's doing a specialist subject, if we knew who we could ask, of knowing that X instructor used to be in the army, and you're teaching someone who's ex-army, have a chat with that instructor and gain some technical insight, or just language that will make sense to them, because language is how we communicate with our pupils most. Find the common language, and that might be. I've taught in the past a lot of people from the traveller community. They have their own way of speaking, and if you understand it, it makes so much more sense. Some of my favorite pupils, and some of them are the most challenging as well. But equally, to say that the graduates from Oxford and Cambridge, who at the end of it will kind of thank you for being able to do something on their level. I'm so not on their level, but if you have the language right, the rest of it works.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's you said about being the god in your own car, and I think actually that's probably one of the biggest challenges we have, is to not be. And I actually interestingly had a new pupil this week, and I haven't had a new pupil for a while because I've been slowly dwindling them down. But this pupil, their mum specifically sort of asked for someone experienced, and the pupil has autism, and so I was like, yep, this is my jam, let's go. And so I sat in the car, and actually, and I wonder if, again, there's the element of the special educational needs, and the fact that they said they had autism maybe highlighted this for me. But I'm sure I would do this for any pupil that gets in my car. Is you might know driving, but they know them. That's always my sort of kind of thing. They are the expert in them. And so we spent the first part of that lesson trying to find out what works for her. And actually it ended up being quite alien lesson for me, because it was very much against what I normally do. So MSPSL, for example, and I did a video on this a while back and stole your look, tell, do idea.
No, you desperately tried not to replicate look, tell, do, and I loved the fact it was almost painful watching you trying not to, because I could see that you wanted to represent it in your way, and I think you did a brilliant job of it. And unfortunately, because then it's on the same kind of approach, isn't it? It almost seems like semantics, just that you change it. Yeah, but it isn't, and it's because the model is the model. It is MSPSL.
I think actually the reason I did that is because I don't actually teach look, tell, do. I don't tell my pupils look, tell, do in the same way I don't tell my pupils MSPSL. I just do the thing, which ends up being more look, tell, do than MSPSL, because MSPSL is a bit rubbish. However, I spoke to this pupil about this, and she had said that she very much likes a process. She likes things to be a certain way. And if I give her a set of routine to do, it works for her and she can do it. And also there was another element of the thing that she was talking to me about, where her mind just goes off. So, for example, at one point we were driving down the road and she was like, oh, birds. And we were approaching a roundabout, and it's not like, oh, birds, back to driving. It's, oh, birds, they are my world right now. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, roundabout, roundabout. And so we used the MSPSL, and we used the fact that I needed to keep her focused. So she ended up talking herself through MSPSL really, really, really well. But it felt alien to me because I don't teach MSPSL. But that's exactly the point. The point is it's not about me, it's about
Yep.
her. And so that lesson became a weird lesson for me, but the perfect lesson for her. And I think that's something that instructors need to sort of be really aware of, is that it doesn't matter that was special educational needs, that's any pupil. Give them the menu, give them the options, and find out what works for that pupil.
Do you think because of the labels that you were given, it made it easier because you go in going, I'm going to have to do this differently or in their way, because they are a defined version of them. It's not that, it almost feels like they're not as flexible, which anyone who's worked with ASD pupils, no, they're not necessarily as flexible. But it's part of what comes with it. So because you go in expecting that it almost makes it going, right, we'll do it in your way from the outset, rather than let's start with my way and then we'll adapt it as I learn more about you.
I would probably do the let's do it your way from the start with any pupil. I think probably what made it easier is because she has been through this process of learning about herself, because getting a diagnosis, I think she was more aware of how she likes to do stuff. So that's probably the bit that made it easier. I think if you go to someone who has just sort of blundered through life and hasn't got any special educational needs and is just sort of kind of sitting there in the middle, they've not really necessarily assessed how they've learned. They've just been always done it how they've been told to do it, and it's been fine. So that's maybe where you do have to then sort of, well, let's try this, see what works, and then you find out, okay, that's not quite working for you. Let's try this. And so, yeah,
you start from that central point because it's what is generally the best one for the most people.
Yeah.
And then work outwards, rather than starting with being right, we'll do it in this way. I always go back to cooking. It's one of my favorite analogies, using cooking and knowing that you're an ex-chef. I'm sure you still cook, but
Yeah.
but it's that thing of, when my other half says, what shall we have for dinner? She doesn't mean that. She means, based on the ingredients that we have available to us, what shall we have for dinner? And having a diagnosis gives you a better idea of what the ingredients that are available, rather than having to open the cupboards and have a look.
So you're saying that the person that has a diagnosis has already looked in the cupboards?
Yes. Or, although often they've been shown what they can't do. And that's the thing for me about diagnoses, whatever the correct one is that you get told you've got this condition and the bad things are this. This is what you'll be bad at. Not so. Let's take dyslexia as a brilliant example, because I sit in a room most months with a group of people who are dyslexic, who have all had a different journey. Half of the room are what I privately title negative dyslexic. And what that is that, rightly or wrongly, their dyslexia has a massive negative impact on their life, and they haven't found how it will benefit them in a lot of ways. And then the other half are the positive ones that have found that they can be creative, or they can work around stuff. Every time I have these conversations, I go, how the hell was I not diagnosed? So it's that thing of, there's pros and cons to everything, but with a diagnosis, you're very rarely told you'll be a brilliant manager because you're good at identifying strengths in other people. You'll be able to short circuit systems. So where people are going, this isn't working, you'll go, well, why don't we try this? And again, that's my solutions approach. Is it comes from an ability to go, well, let's look at it from a different angle. Let's see it in a different way. And I think that, you kind of, if you get your pupil that you know nothing about, it's a lucky dip. You're gonna, pull out a technique, one that you use, and see if it works. Whereas, arguably, we could have two boxes of lucky dip. We could have a boys and a girls, because actually we know that boys and girls learn differently. So we might teach boys and girls a bit differently. But if we end up with smaller subsections of lucky dips, where we've got the one for all of the lovely autistic people, they're my favourite pupils, absolutely. Still with the theory, that I learn more from them. I'm sure that's what it is. We've got the box of these are the ones, that are most likely to work. So we've kind of siphoned it down a bit.
And I think that actually will bring us on to what we're going to talk about later with the national standards, because that unit that we're going to talk about actually incorporates a lot of what we just mentioned. So let's move on and talk about our competency for this week as we're working our way through them. So this week's competency is: was the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals? What does that mean to you, Chris?
So the two big things that stand out in there is the adaptation, change stuff, and I always say plan to change the plan. You have an idea of where you're going, but expect to change it. You're looking for your first opportunity to change it, because then you're open to change. And if you're open to change, you won't get those blinkers on. And then the pupil's learning goals and needs, that learning focus of that pupil being it's theirs, very much about being theirs, and about how are we best going to get through that journey? How are we going to offer the best support? Because that's what the adaptation's about. Is, are we delivering the best set of skills for ourselves, our own skills, and then we're working it through. It takes you back to the initial competency, which is the being aware of the goals, having a goal in the first place. If you haven't done that bit first, then this bit is going to fail miserably, because you're not going to know what you're doing. It's locking people in. There's a brilliant. I didn't mention amateur magician. So I've done magic for years. I know lots of magicians, and I'm not very good at it, but I know how it's done, and that's what I like. I like the mechanics.
Quite a big hat, because you need to be able to fit rabbits in it and stuff.
and doves, yeah. Because the other one I didn't mention was falconer. But anyway, I thought I need to keep it a little bit niche. So yeah, non-practicing falconer. But what was I talking? Darren Brown. Darren Brown did a brilliant experiment in the way that only Darren Brown can, where he locked people in a room with stuff, and there was a counter that went up, and they had to try and figure out how to make the numbers go up. So it was about superstition and creating habits. So they'd suddenly try and replicate what they did before. Spoiler alert, skip forwards, 60 seconds if you don't want to hear. The timer just went up randomly. Nothing to do with, and I think we have this as instructors in the car. We think that our action has a reaction with the pupil, when actually, if we sat there and kept them safe, they'd learn to drive. We're not as valuable as we think we are. We need to be. That's our job. Our job is to make ourselves valuable in a way of finding how we can best support that learner and their outcome, which is being able to drive. At what level that driving comes in, whether it's DVSA minimum standards or whether it's about safe driving for life, which is just a bit cliche as a phrase, or whether it's about actually never crashing inside their lifetime and being as safe as they can be, wherever that driving is, that's a separate conversation, possibly the one we're going to have next. But that's their goal. So whatever that goal level is, ours is the adaptation. Ours is the working with them. I think the hardest part of that competency is knowing when. When do you change the plan, or when do you ignore it? There's a danger ignoring it. You've got someone on the back seat on a part 3 on a standards check, looking at you as to, they're judging, aren't they? That's one of the problems. So I always say it's good to verbally put a pin in it, acknowledge it, and put a pin in it, and say it's not affecting our current goal. It's fine. It's not affecting our risk. So we can put that in a pile for another day, or we can change the plan totally. Which way are we going to go? But you don't have to ask their permission. You can make a judgment call, but you should have their awareness of it. Because it might be something they're not aware they're doing and they can just fix themselves. Because as an instructor, just being sat there keeping them safe will get the job done. And that's where you hear so often, I must be doing all right. I've got a really good pass rate, which translates to my pupils are reaching a minimum standard, and that is good enough. And therefore, what can we do to improve that, to actually make that higher? And the way we can improve it is by seeing the best path. Also by challenging what that goal is at the end of things, but making it relevant, achievable. I hate a SMART goal, but it blooming works. But I figured it out the other day, for me at least. I don't know if this translates. I'm not aware that I've said this out loud yet. But yeah, so SMART goals are so specific, measurable, spelling it in my head, achievable, realistic, timed, or words to that effect, because there's variations on it. Forget goals, make them tasks. You are giving a task to someone else. Then SMART works really well. If it's a goal, why are you stopping me shooting for the stars? I don't want it to be realistic. I've never got anywhere in life with a realistic goal. I've wanted to be really good at everything that I take on, and I don't always manage it. But that's not going to stop me wanting it. Arguably, maybe if it was a SMART goal, I'd have achieved more. But you know what? What am I not achieving? If I decide to buy something from you and I say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 50 quid for it, and you go, yeah, lovely, thank you very much. I'm going, why didn't I say 30? It's finding that, if we put a cap on it, we've put a cap on it. And I think to link the two together, that's where minimum standard, safe driving for life, best driver ever, that's where there's a danger that we put this cap on it. Either the cap by the DVSA of going, well, you've only got to reach this level, or the cap by safe driving for life, because that's what we think it is, and those things. So specifically with that competence, it's choosing whether to adapt it and having the focus so we know whether it needs to be adapted. And that is nothing to do with that competency. It's actually about, have you set the goals? Have you agreed how you're going to work? It's all the stuff above it and below it. Yeah, above it and below it. It's all the other competencies. That one really kind of is just a pivot point of, are you doing your job properly?
Yeah, it's interesting that this competency is probably the one that causes the most problems, I think, throughout the whole test, in that people do get a bit blinkered and don't adapt, and then that sends a snowball effect down the whole of the competency sheet, because you're suddenly now not identifying the needs, you're not you're not using learning outcomes and things like that. So it sort of snowballs. And you said earlier about people struggle to know how to adapt, I think you said. And I would also add that to when to adapt, or maybe how much to adapt. That's another thing I think people struggle with.
Just said you've just triggered a light, literally, which is what I'm about to say. In what you've said about this being the competency that is sort of the biggest one, I don't think it is. I think it's the big flashing light that tells you there's things are wrong with the other ones. And I think, and I say I think, I've just thought because of what you said, that actually it's a big flashing red light. It doesn't do anything. It's the big flashing red light in the corner, and that's probably what the examiner sees. It's definitely what I see when I'm a trainer. I sit in the back and I go, you need to change something. What I really mean is you need to go back to the start of that timeline process. And it's you are not Homer Simpson with one button and a red light. you need to be taking an action and having a plan and doing more than just going, yeah, that's wrong. That's not enough.
Yeah. No, I like that analogy that there's a big red light over there flashing, which is your adapt, sort of kind of like, but then you go over there, and then it isn't just adapt. It's what do I need to change, and I do think how much do I need to change it, because there's different levels of adaptation. I think there's the we need to scrap what we were doing and go and do this thing because it's important. Or there's the we need to have one sentence to sort it out. So the example I always like to use is a mirror check. So you are heading towards doing roundabouts maybe, and your pupil is not checking their mirrors or has forgotten to check their mirrors. That is not a reason to go and then completely scrap doing roundabouts and head off and do, I don't know, junctions and MSPSL and all that sort of kind of stuff. That is the reason to have a conversation with your pupil, find out why they didn't check their mirrors, and you might find that it was just a brain fart, and now actually from that point you've mentioned it, they're going to be fine and they'll do the mirrors. You're about to go and do a hell of a lot of mirrors when you do the roundabouts. Incorporate it into the lesson and build on it as you go through. But the flip side is you're about to go do some quite busy roundabouts, and your pupil is approaching some junctions and is coming in too fast or stalling, and is really struggling with the junctions on the way out of the test center, and that situation. Maybe now we need to make that a bigger deal, and go and find, like, let's go and sort this out before we go to the roundabouts, because it's only going to get worse when we put a big roundabout into the scenario. So I think that's my sort of theory behind, like, how much do we adapt in those scenarios, and knowing when to. But a lot of it for me in this, I don't like talking about faults, but I think with this competency, if I really had a PDI just like last minute coming up to a part 3 struggling with this one, I generally just go, just fix the faults. Like, if a pupil makes a mistake, have a conversation. Basically,
it's also your part 3 standards check is a 40-minute window. If you want to fix a cause, you need more than 40 minutes, because it won't have happened in the first minute. It will have happened, at least midway through, and at that point you've got to work with what you've got in your cupboard, which is 15 minutes left if you're lucky, because you've also got to get back. And we know that we're working on their timetable, not ours. Rubbish. Just turn around to the examiner and go, normally I'd go back around the block, but I know we've got to drop you off. Would you rather I did that after I finished this? Throw it in their court. That's perfectly acceptable. They'll say it's not, but do it. I bet they answer. And I bet they say, no, let's go back. But you've proven your point then. I'm going to adapt, but I haven't got enough scope to adapt around that subject. But I think also, based on what you were saying, the question that I get asked is, when do I stop? Every time. Because if you're asking yourself that question of should I stop for it, yes, stop when it's safe and convenient, and that should be part of your lesson plan anyway, of having a route where you can stop. And you will be able to, in a fraction of the amount of time, figure it out, give them the explanation. Was it a lapse, or was it a deliberate infringement? Was it that they weren't aware of that, or are they focused on something else? And then you can go, well, let's make sure it doesn't happen again. As you said, fix the fault. Then, once we've got shot of whoever's in the back, on a normal lesson, normal lessons aren't 40 minutes. I'm sorry. It's the only thing I disagree with of this normal lesson thing is I don't teach hour-long lessons, which is why I promote chunking and doing everything in 10 minutes, because then you can adapt.
You also don't start at the test center normally.
No, but interestingly, though, the Part 3 or standards check doesn't start at the test center, because, as we know, they're now not really looking at the goals and the risk bit. They want a recap. So I always say that you do get an hour. It's just they're only there for 40 minutes of it. Make use of the extra 20 minutes. Have that. So you've got that plan, and you can summarize it for them. But it's that thing of, if you're asking yourself the question, where's the harm in stopping for a moment? You're allowed. It was during COVID, they wanted wheels really moving. Now it's a pupil who can keep the wheels moving. Doesn't mean they will. Stop them and ask them. Go, right, just really quickly, just tell me about what you got to do with mirrors. Yeah, good, remember, do you want me to prompt you? Do you want me to do? Shall we be retrospective with it, or shall I go? What are you going to check now for the next few, and then, and then I'll back off and change the level of instruction, because that's what that red flashing light is. It's about change. Whether it's change the goal, change the level of instruction, change the so you can't change the pupil. It's too late at that point. Be nice sometimes. My most recent PDI to have passed previously failed, and he will be listening, so hi Rob. So he his first Part 3, he won't mind me saying this, just to let everyone know it's okay, pupil totally went sideways, totally different pupil in the car, and he knows now full well he should have stopped and restarted, because that was the solution. Total restart, because it was a different pupil. And as we said before, different pupils need different strategies. Same body, different pupil. And second test, he did that. He adapted. It was the flashing light he ignored. So yeah, exactly that. It just needs that sometimes.
I was intrigued by this you said about stopping, and I think you're right. It's a question I get asked a lot. I'm not a fan of what sometimes gets banded around, which is, if it was a serious fault on the driving test, then pull over, and if not, don't, because there's too many variables in that. And even like you're sort of kind of like you said about that, you could just pull over for a quick chat about the mirror, and absolutely, like, but it for me, it depends on what road you're on. If you're on a long straight road and there's not much going on, have the conversation. If you're about to get to your first roundabout that you were planning on going to do, then let's pull over first, because stuff's going to happen at the roundabout. You're going to get lost in it. It's just too much. Yeah. So I think there's too many variables in that conversation, and maybe that's why PDI struggle actually on knowing when to and when not to. Is there's too many variables, but it has to just feel right in my opinion. It's like, if it feels like you're going to struggle to have the conversation, then stop. That's kind of how I go. Is it? Yeah.
I think that's the thing, though, is if the choice is stop or keep going, and you're asking yourself the question, stop.
Yeah, because it popped into your head, and
control the situation, because that's all you can do is control it. That's what they mean by this risk management thing. Is it's about making sure that you've addressed the situation. If you're going, I can deal with this while moving, and you have a good understanding of what you can deal with while moving, because a lot of people don't, they think that they can. I'm going to rephrase that. I don't care if you can deal with it when moving. Can your pupil cope with it? Because it's your job to be able to deal with stuff on the move. So you're really good at that. If you're not, you're probably not going to be successful at the test. That's the thing to go and work on yourself for your personal development. Can your pupil cope with having that conversation? And it's a bit like trying to talk to a bloke who's watching TV. Women are much better at that, having two conversations on the go, totally stereotyping and being binary and all the rest of it. But generally speaking, it's an evolutionary skill. It's the same as men have got much narrower vision, peripheral vision, than women, because the women were outside the caves looking after the kids, and all the ones without good peripheral vision got killed off by predators. The men were out hunting. They're going to kill it or run away from it. So there is this evolutionary difference, and we'll often see that in the car. We've also got the anxiety difference. The more stressed someone is, the less they listen, and the less they can listen. Your hearing shuts down when you're massively stressed. So just because you're relaxed doesn't mean that they are. So stop. So more often than not, stop is going to be the solution if you're asking yourself that question.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I think then it's about keeping it as brief as it needs to be, but also if that conversation develops, it's okay. Yeah. If learning is taking place,
yes,
then it's fine. Just don't waffle.
I have that issue occasionally. So my audits check, because if you want to avoid a standards check, become a trainer and become audit. And at the moment, then you get an audit check instead. I don't think it's any easier. I just think it's different. I was told role play, wheels moving. I didn't do any of that. Examiner absolutely loved it. I was using look, tell, do, which he refused to write down on my sheet because he said someone will put it in a book somewhere and I should get that written down. It's a bit old school for me. I just stuck it on social media instead. But I don't claim to have invented look, tell, do. All I did was put reasoning behind it and distilled it down so that it was as good as I can make it. I welcome someone coming along and improving on that because I love it when that happens. But just breaking it down and having some reasoning and it making sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, I can't work with it. I like it when it makes sense. But it because they're giving us this model of how it should go. It's a human being who's looking at, exactly as you said, Phil, for learning to take place. If they can see that happening, they don't really care how you achieve it, as long as it's inside of the rules. And to quote Dr. Julia Malkin, MBE, one of the big lessons that she taught me long time ago now was any test that you are taking, know the criteria, be able to meet the criteria, because you don't get anything for beating it. If road safety is involved, the better you are, the safer you are. Safety is the criteria. That's quite a scope. But if we're looking at a driving test or looking at a part 3 test, if you know that criteria, then you should be successful at it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why I want to have these conversations on the podcast, is to help people have a better understanding of the competencies. I think one more thing I just want to talk about before we move on from this is, and just maybe because people aren't maybe aware of this, because normally adaptation tends to be because something's going wrong, let's sort it out. But this can also get marked down for when you don't adapt because it's going well and you just carry on doing the same thing, and it gets a bit boring. That's how I describe it when I'm sat in the back of a lesson. It's like I'm bored. Like, do something interesting.
And at that point, learning's not happening, is it?
Yeah,
you're getting into mundane repetition, which there is a place for. Drumming it in. A bit of good repetition, especially if you have someone who has processing issues, so dyslexia, ADHD, although you've got to keep their focus, so there's a balancing act to be done there, actual complex memory issues, anything like that where you're trying to drum it in. Habits take a bit longer. but you can still be drumming it in and turning up the heat. And it's that level of things. Absolutely. And I think as many people fail for that or get marked down for that as get marked down for shooting too high. And I think it's, depending on the picture in your head, either the volume dial or the slider switch, you need one of those controls that you can visualize of going, what am I going to turn up? What am I going to turn down? We can't change the pupil, but we can change two other things. So we can either change the level of difficulty, so we go from our quiet side roads onto more busy roads, or change our level of instruction or style of instruction, or both. But we can't change the pupil. And sometimes, and we see this from pupils, and we see it because of the negative, they'll be doing really well, and then you'll up the difficulty without telling them, and they'll suddenly feel like they're rubbish today. We need to be open and sharing about how, right, what we're going to do is we're going to change this. So what I might have to do is change my level of instruction to give you a little bit more support, because it's getting a bit more difficult. And it's that seesaw in the car of going between, how much help am I giving you and how difficult is it going to be? We do it when it hits the fan, because you go on what should be really easy, nice little drive, just it's giving us exactly what we want. But we didn't know that the big learner relay was coming in the other direction, and there were going to be 100, driving instructors. I saw that on a lesson. I had the panic on a instructor's face. They should have got involved. They wouldn't have had the problem then. But it was an awesome moment of 100 driving instructor cars coming across a roundabout with a learner sitting on an actual proper driving lesson, going, how the hell do I find a gap in this? And the answer was, step it up. Just sit here, let them come through. It'll pass, which is one of my favourite Tom Hanks phrases. This too shall pass. It applies to everything.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter whether you're having a good day or a bad day.
Yeah. I like you describing it as like dials. That's something I've sort of kind of used in the past. I have this sort of kind of image that a driving lesson's a bit like a radio, like an old style radio, and the weather keeps changing, and so it gets a bit crackly, and your job is to tweak those dials to make it a nice sort of kind of smooth sound. And that's how I feel a lesson is. You're tweaking that challenge, you're tweaking your support, you're tweaking what we're working on, and you're just dialing these tunes to get that radio tuned in. And sometimes that's a big, like, you have to flip from AM to FM, and sometimes it's just a little tiny tweak of the frequency. And so that's probably what I think, actually, if you sum it up, adapting a lesson, it's deep, like tweaking those dials.
And what's nice about that, most cars have got those in it.
Yeah.
You've got, even if you go with the heat, with the the aircon system of going with that, you've got something in front of you that you can use to visualize that. Relabel them, get some labels printed, put them in the car to remind you that actually it's not fixed. You can do something about it. There is an action you can take, even if that action is stop, which I would use the hazard light button as a this is our emergency button. We're going to stop and we're going to just deal with the issue.
That's my ejector seat button for when I do want to change the pupil. So moving on, we're going to talk about the national standards for driver and rider training. And this next unit 3, is enable safe and responsible driving stroke riding. So, Chris, did you want to talk about this? Or actually, I'll tell you what, before we do that, I just want to have a quick read of the first sort of kind of paragraph in this, because I think it's it sort of kind of sums up what we do in the car. So it says this unit is about helping and supporting a learner to acquire the skills, knowledge, and understanding that they need to drive safely and responsibly throughout their driving career. And I love that little phrase, driving career. This means that this unit is not just about teaching a learner to pass a test. Instead, it is about developing a learner's competence and their willingness to continue the learning process beyond their test. Now, before I sort of kind of let you go into this, I think because you talk a lot about minimum standards and the DVSA being at minimum standards, and I get why you do that because of the driving test, and even actually the standards check is I suppose minimum standards in that sense, and that's what they test. I think to the DVSA's credit, this is a DVSA document, and they have it there in black and white that this is what we should be doing. So they do say we should be doing it.
I've had it from the DVSA that that's their answer, which is we do give maximum standards. That's the national standards. That's based on be the best you can be. That's really what it's all about, and about setting that it lays out the pitch so we know what we're supposed to be doing, where we're supposed to be doing it, and how. But in a really good way, it's still not the easiest thing to read if you're not a reader. And I think that's where we fall short as an industry. I've been fighting with the TSO, Stationery Office, who publish the books, Essential Skills and such, for a long time now, about the fact there's no audiobook versions. I finally got told, we'll buy it on Kindle because it will read it to you. It's been at least a year of me saying, why are there no audiobooks? And they've suddenly announced that as if I should know.
But I could have told you that. I read the entire Game of Thrones stories that way.
So I never come across it because I use Apple all the time, and they tend to favour their own.
You can do it on an Apple device.
It's just not one of the native things, is it? And you're either Apple or you're not. But they're really well written, and I think the same for the DT. The DT1, the driving examiner guidance. If you read the explanation of a maneuver on there, there's nothing more to say. It is what it says. And I think the national standards is exactly the same. For me, the really interesting paragraph is the fourth one. And this is how important and how well written it is. I'm quoting DVSA, which I don't do unless I'm criticising it as a general rule. And I like the DVSA. There's lovely people at the DVSA. It's the actual machine that I object to. Client-centered learning is not about the learner taking charge of the learning process and deciding what is going to happen. Instead, it's about creating a conversation between the learner and the instructor that is based on mutual respect. That's possibly that busts the biggest myth that we've got in the industry, which is the learner is in charge. What would you like to do today? And that is what Unit 3 is about. It's about enabling a safe and responsible approach to learning to drive. That's it. So we maintain the risk. We don't overfeed them so they don't choke on it. When my eldest was tiny, we got the wrong teats on the bottle and wondered why it was throwing up all the time. It's the same thing in the car. If you're overfeeding them, then people are going to panic. They're not going to learn because they're going to shut down. They're not going to enjoy it. And they're not going to understand. And that's what this unit's all about. And it looks beautifully at different ways of doing that, the different parts of the process. The one that might seem a bit alien is the last of the elements, which is group-based learning. That's our fault. We are missing a trick. Theory is a good example of it. We're doing things on a one-to-one basis all the time. Group-based could be 2-to-1. Group-based could be a WhatsApp group where you discuss things with your learners. Be careful of safeguarding, be careful of GDPR, just to have said it. But it is just making sure that you're trying to engage with more people, and your learners are doing it already because they're talking to their friends, they're talking to their parents, and all of those different stakeholders are part of that picture and that process. And then the other thing I love about this unit is it states evidence, which we ignore because we know better. And the irony, this unit is the biggest irony in the industry, because it specifically states that telling someone something is not good enough because they will forget it. They'll forget what they've been told and they will go back to their own beliefs. Educating them about it and discussing it with them and guiding them through it will help change those beliefs, and therefore they'll take that with them. And the irony is, driving instructors who don't like client-centered, because it's the newfangled DVSA thing since 1980, Unit 3, I don't believe has changed much since it was labeled with DSA. So it's going back a while. It's the approach to it instructors don't like because they're being told what to do. The essence of it is the opposite of that. It's saying, discover what your learner is bringing to the table and engage with them about it. Don't tell them, well, you can't tell me not to tell them. Well, why not? Because I'm not doing what you're saying, but you expect your learner to do what you told him to. It makes my head hurt.
Yeah, that paragraph, it was my next one I had written down. It's definitely a good one, and I also like actually that what you have just said about that. They explain this element as there's 3 other sections. Well, 4. There is 4, but there's 3, and then the 4th one is all 3, but for groups, sort of kind of thing. So that's the way they sort of kind of do it. But they do actually explain that each element can't be done on its own. They're part of a process together. I think that thing you were talking about, how not so much, like in my head, not so much client-centered, but more that people don't like coaching.
Yes.
And I think here what they are saying is a client-centered approach has coaching and instruction within it. And I think actually coaching has instruction within it, in that sense. Because the coach the instruction would be part of the coaching process in that sense, that the person has decided or has shown that they need instruction. That's their way of learning.
It's also, if you go to a good coach who says, I don't instruct, I coach, they'll set the table saying, this is how we're going to work. Well, that's not coaching.
No, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Isn't it? It's that element of that bit being laid out.
Yeah.
So I just think coaching as the word inside the industry has been so misrepresented, missold, that I am a qualified coach. I'm a qualified life coach, business coach. I don't call myself a coach. I use the skills, but I am a conversational instructor.
Yeah.
I don't like coaching as a phrase.
But I like just the fact that they've broke this down into so the 3 elements are called. So the first one is create a climate that promotes learning. Like, who doesn't want to do that? So that's rapport building, really, isn't it? Then explain and demonstrate skills and techniques. So this is that moment where we are teaching a technical aspect. You can't coach all technical things, because you could really push it to the limits, I suppose, and maybe get the pupil to go and find the information for themselves as in a coaching, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes in the moment on a lesson, it's worth you explaining or demonstrating a skill so that the pupil can learn from that. And then the final part is just coaching. And I do like that their description of coaching, which is this element is about engaging in a conversation with a learner to help them identify obstacles to to learning and strategies for overcoming these obstacles. So it's just about finding out what's wrong and finding a way around it. Like it doesn't have to be this big scary word.
But can we actually achieve professionalism if we just say have a chat? You know, is that danger, isn't it? And this has always been a big thing of, on paper, driving instructors don't have a value. You know, if we give them the keys and a sandbox, a safe area, people will learn how to drive. They'll figure it out. It is the infinite monkey cage. If you give the monkeys the typewriter, they'll write the works of Shakespeare given enough time, just by randomness, not by intelligence. Driving's not that complicated. It's what we say. So we have to find the value that we can offer, which is either to expedite the process or to manage the safety. It's perfectly acceptable to say, as an instructor, what we're doing is sitting there and making sure they don't crash, making sure that a problem's not caused. Odd that that's on the part 3 in the standards check, isn't it? Mitigating that risk. It shouldn't be called risk management, risk mitigation. So yeah, those are the factors. It's just have a chat. That's a balanced conversation, isn't it? It's where I've got stuff that you might want. It's me in my retail job saying, what are you looking for? What have I got? And do any of those things match? Which one matches best? Which one do you want to buy into?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I heard a phrase the other day about it might have been Bob actually on the previous one, where your job is to facilitate a learning environment, basically. So you're right, people will learn themselves eventually. They might bash off like a few walls and bounce off a few other cars on the way to learning themselves, but they will learn eventually. Our job, like you said, is to speed that up and keep it safe. That is our job. And then a lot of the time, and I think this may be, and I had this chat with Bob last week about what parents do better. And I think sometimes as instructors, one of the most important things we can do is get out of the way. We get in the way of learning sometimes by trying to force feed learning, and get out of the way and let them develop and find that information for themselves, and it will last so much longer and it will probably come to them quicker as well. Yeah.
And it's that long curve, isn't it? I upset Mark Bourne from BSM when he was at Cardington delivering a presentation, because his graph ended at the driving test, and he was doing a session about client-centered learning, and I was like, that's not right. What we're looking at is, what does the tail do after they've demonstrated a minimum standard? What does that tail do? Now, someone who has been purely told all the way through, the drop-off of what we want them to be doing is going to be quite high. They're going to find their own way. They can mechanically operate, because the driving test only addresses the level 1 and 2 of the GDE matrix, the car and the road. That's it. They can mechanically operate, but the drop-off will be how to then deal with it. What speed should they be going on? A choice of speed, not a legal limit, but a choice. And it's Road Safety Week. Let's talk about speed this time round. So, you know, that's a really interesting conversation for instructors to be engaging with this week, because it's National Road Safety Week. Should we guess the percentage of instructors that are actually going to engage when we're in that opportunity every single lesson to say, this week there's a real focus on speed? So what do you think about speed? I'm going to go with single figure percentages.
I don't want to guess, it's too upsetting.
Yeah. Because there's an opportunity. I nearly forgot it was National Road Safety Week, Brakes Road Safety Week. So I'm doing some work with Josh's Heart of Gold, which is a charity really close to my heart, because Josh was a young lad who got run over and killed not even a quarter of a mile from my house. And I have I'm going to say the pleasure of working with his mum. It feels like the wrong word, but from great tragedy, there's some amazing stuff happening, and she's supporting people who are in a similar situation where, you know, they're bereaved families, and she's giving them enough money to get a takeaway that night so that they haven't got to worry or pay for the hotel room, or, you know, things like that. Doing some amazing work, campaigning against the government, also trying to get Epic Games. If anyone knows anyone at Epic Games, have a word, trying to get them so that charities can have a skin on Fortnite and other games, that some of that money goes to the charity. So you can go and support your charity that way. And, you know, she reminded me that this week was Road Safety Week, because I nearly missed it. And it's in my diary, but I forgot to engage. It's so easy to forget to engage and just to go on doing what you planned to do that week, which fits in with everything we've spoken about. Is then it's about making sure you're aware, you're in the moment. And that's what this unit is about. That's what the competency is about. It's about having a conversation. And a conversation is not, and we've all done it, where you're going to you're going to ask for a pay rise, or you're going into a situation where, you know, someone hasn't paid you for lessons, so you know you're going into an argument, and you rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and that's not the conversation that you have. And sometimes they just go, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot, and you go, no, you've got to tell me this, because then I can have the argument that I've rehearsed in my head.
I saw a great TikTok video of that, where the whole Karen thing, and somebody went in and she said, oh sorry, yeah, well, you can have your money back, and the lady looked disappointed, and she said, oh sorry, were you here for an argument? Just like, yes please. Oh yeah. And then so they have the argument, and then they leave. And it's great. I think some people just want the battle. Just with what you were talking about, Road Safety Week. So this is actually going out the week after Road Safety Week. But if you've missed Road Safety Week, go back and do it anyway. Go and have the conversations, because so I've posted a video yesterday. So actually, again, you go back and have a look at that. I posted 2 videos actually. One for learners and drivers on my driving school page, and then one for driving instructors about how we can have that conversation about speed with pupils. And the other thing I did actually, and I think I would recommend this to anyone, any driving instructor actually, is I went to, do you know the charity Learn to Live?
Yes.
It might be just quite local to me, I'm not sure.
Oh, you might have mentioned it. That might be why they're...
Yeah. So they are like, it's put together by the police, fire brigade, so the emergency services and councils and things like that. And they go out and present to like teenagers basically. And I went to the presentation yesterday, and I would recommend all driving instructors go and see what these guys are presenting, because it's brilliant. First of all, it's brilliant. It's based off research and how people take information and how to change people's behaviors. So it's brilliant. It's also amazing to see how the teenagers engaged with it. They want this information. And actually, if you've seen how it's been presented, you can then go, have you been to a Learn to Live presentation, or whatever's local to your area?
Yeah.
And that can start some great conversations with people. So I would definitely recommend people to get out to those, see what your road safety charities are doing locally, and get involved with that. Just a little story from that day yesterday, because I like, it was a big crowd, so I couldn't find this kid, but I wanted to go and steal him and make him come and learn to drive with me, because he gave the best answer. So they showed this video of a car driving, and actually it's what the hazard perception should be, because it was hazard prediction. They paused the video just before the hazard and said, what might happen here? And just before they paused it, the car coming towards us that was supposed to be turning right had just tweaked a little bit to the right, like a millimeter. And a lot of them didn't spot it. Some did, which was fantastic. But this one kid and on the video there was mirrors as well, so you could see a middle mirror and wing mirrors at the same time. And this one kid put his hand up and said, the red car behind me might be about to hit me from behind, because I'm about to brake. And I was like, wow, I want that kid. Come here, come and learn to drive. And the guy giving the presentation was like, oh, no one's ever said that before. And it was brilliant because he'd looked in his mirrors when he saw the hazard, and the red car behind was really close. And actually, it was interesting. It may have happened. Like the car might have just like hit him from behind when they slammed on the brakes. So I think it shows that if you have these conversations and you engage with them, that they want to know this stuff.
Yes, and every question you don't ask, you don't know what the answer is going to be. So, and it's always that thing of ask questions you do not know the answer to. The difference between an A and a B is asking questions you don't know the answer to, because they're the ones that will give you something to work with. Finding that nugget of information that you can then adapt, or you can throw back at them. Just on charities, the other one is the honest truth. There's some brilliant fodder for driving lessons in there, of a short video that you can then have a conversation about. And that's what we need, are opportunities to open up conversations. That's the instructor's job.
All of the driving instructors use honest truth, so we all use it. And we did chat about this with Stuart, because Stuart's doing a bit of work with them. And yeah, they're just amazing. Like, if you want a tool that helps you facilitate those conversations, then I get that sometimes for instructors it can be awkward to bring up these conversations, I think, or like just out of the blue. So why not show them a video at the start of the lesson and go, what do you think about that? That's all you have to ask, and then go with it. And it can be part of the lesson all the way through. I remember, and I did tell this story on the previous podcast, but I remember showing my daughter this video about the seatbelts. And then my question was, who in your life who in your life might not wear a seatbelt in your car? And she said, Granddad. And I was like, my dad? She said, yeah, Granddad. I'm like, really? So then we had to have a conversation with my dad about wearing his seatbelt, because he'd never not done it with me, but clearly she'd seen him not wearing a seatbelt in that situation. So it just opens up conversations and how you would handle that, and how would you come up with solutions. I think it's my after speaking to Terry about this, actually, it's one of my passions is road safety, and I was talking to Terry about it, and he agreed, and he said, and he agreed that with himself in this is, we're passionate about it, but actually, do we post about it enough? And I was like, no, not really. I don't put it on social media. So this is my new sort of kind of thing that I'm trying to push, is that I'm going to be posting more on both my driving school page and my instructor training page, about how to have these conversations, and also from a driving school page point of view, like stuff people should know. And I think that's, the more we do that, if 40,000 instructors did that, it would get the message out there.
The problem is it gets a bit preachy quite easily. This is the problem I've had looking at Road Safety Week and deciding what to put on socials, is it's all doom and gloom stuff. It doesn't really fit with my vibe, the way that I tend to work. It can get that way very easily. I saw a lovely TikTok, and I don't know who to credit, because I didn't catch who it was. Either TikTok or Instagram. But it was an instructor who was recording a video talking about roundabouts, and he got it wrong. And he ignored, because he was busy in his commentary. He was stationary. He didn't do anything dangerous. Just as a driver, he got it wrong. He ignored the lorry next to him. And then he went, oh, now I'm going to hold back here, because that guy is really big and he's going to take up my space. And he should have known beforehand, because it was there. But we're not perfect. And actually, talking about our imperfections with driving is probably the best way to have that conversation. Drink driving. When did you, or when were you at risk of it? Or, talk about your real life and those things there, rather than, saying never do it.
Yeah.
Because we know from Unit 3 that telling them doesn't stay with them as long as educating and making them think about it. and my pupils will be able to tell you my stories involving alcohol and driving. I'm not putting them on a podcast. I will happily talk to any individual about them. I'm very honest about my history of things, and at no point have I ever deliberately broken the law regarding that. But I'm better educated now than I used to be. So, you know, they're all next day stories, but 1 in 3 drink driving convictions is next day. So, you know, if you want that conversation, get in touch. But it is, have that conversation, exactly that. And if these things facilitate that conversation, and if we can put things out there where they go, I saw that video of you, they've come to you, not just because they need someone to sit next to them and keep them safe while they figure out how to pass the driving test. They've come to you because you've said something that's interested them. You know, that is the holy grail. And if you want to know where your faults are in your driving, get some kids in the back and let them comment on your driving, because as you and I know, they're brutal.
Yep. Daddy, put your hands on the wheel. Yeah. Definitely get that. So I think before we I'd like to finish with a top tip from you, and I appreciate you've already given us loads of massive content, and I also appreciate that I forgot to I always forget to tell you guys, put you on the spot, but then I think sometimes that is the best way, because you just come up with whatever's in your head at that point. Before we get to that though, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
I'm all over the place. So the best place to go and have a look, because you might find something that's helpful for you, is theditc.co.uk. You can find me through there, or on Facebook, or on the website Theory Test Explained, theorytestexplained.co.uk, and find me through that. I'm suffering the problem of not enough hours in the day, so excuse the website. But get in touch. The one-to-one personalized advice is much better than the website is. But they're the best places to contact me. But say, signposting platform for the industry, if you're looking for something, I'm a good place to start.
Yep, I'm always messaging you stuff like that. So if you can find me at theinstructortrainer.com or Cowley's Instructor Training on Facebook, and yeah, come and ask me any questions. I do one-to-one training, and I'm also an admin on Lou's PDI group, and we offer massive support to PDIs on there, and it's a great place to make sure you're getting the right information. And also, it's a very safe place to ask questions. It's a super supportive group. Everyone really sort of kind of helps each other out on that group. So, Chris, what is your top tip for ADIs and PDIs?
I think I go back to my fundamental rules, and it's a really good technique to do with your learners. It fits in with everything we've said, which is I used to ask people to come up with their 10 commandments of driving. So the 10 real rules, because this shows you what their beliefs are, what's important to them, and give them permission for them to change as their learning goes on. They don't have to be serious. You know, don't break the speed limit. You know, it doesn't have to be that. One of mine is don't trust anyone with a Magic Tree air freshener. Firstly, air fresheners hanging from your rearview mirror are illegal. It's an MOT failure. I don't think tests should be allowed to go out if you've got something hanging from your rearview mirror. It's one of my genuine passions as a subject. And then when there's examiners that have got them hanging, I think we should be able to smash their windscreen. No, I'm joking. Sorry. No, I think there's this thing of, you're going to criticize my driving, but you've got an illegal car, I will not respect you as much as I should. So let's all try and be better. Yeah. But actually, it came from someone told me that psycho thriller films, the killer is always the one with the Magic Tree air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. And I started watching them and realizing it was true. So there must be some kind of franchise going on, a bit like the Church and Hovis. So they've got this thing of air fresheners there. And then I noticed everyone who cuts me up on the road had a Magic Tree or similar air freshener. I don't think it's just Magic Tree. It's not something in the smell that makes them bad. But they were the ones cutting me up. And I noticed that if I saw them and kept away from them, I was safer on my journey. Probably because we're not supposed to have things dangling from the rear view. So it's a clue towards someone's understanding and safety levels and the choices. A bit like police officers will often tell you that a private number plate is a really good sign for pulling someone over. They'll probably find something else from it, those kind of things, the little clues. We do them as driving instructors. So get pupils to come up with their 10 commandments of driving. Share some of yours and have some funny, have some serious, never letting the car roll back, because in this country we value clutch control, except for the automatic drivers. We value not letting the car roll back. Therefore, pedestrians are more likely to walk behind the car. Whereas in countries where everybody rolls back a bit, they don't walk behind the car in the first place. They avoid it because they expect that. So it's a lovely approach to figure out and get an insight into the belief structure and personality of and thoughts of your pupil that you will be able to refer back to. And if you can get them to really buy into it, and they say something or something happens and you go, do you want to put that as one of your 10 rules? And it doesn't have to be 10. It just sounded good being the 10 commandments. So you put that in, or you take one out, or you add more, so you end up with 23. That will help you achieve an approach that is working with the individual, help you to give them a learning that they're going to carry with them for longer, and then that development is going to continue long after they've left you.
I love that. And I'm going to go and do that. So yeah, I think that's possibly the first top tip that I'm like, oh, I could do that because I've not already done it. I think the other top tips on all the other podcasts were great, but I think it's stuff I already did. Whereas this is where, I'm going to go and do that with my pupils. And I also hate hanging things from the mirrors as well. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. And thank you everyone for listening. And I'll see you next time. Cowley's Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops.